All right, so as we said, welcome to summer programming with We Are Water. So just to start with some quick introductions, my name is Claire Ratcliffe-Adams. My pronouns are she, her. I am an education associate at the Space Science Institute located in Boulder, Colorado. I'm also one of the PIs on the We Are Water project, which is an NSF funded project where all of these resources and activities came from. And I will pass it over to Dylan to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dylan Connolly. My pronouns are he and they. I'm an education specialist at the Space Science Institute and the National Center for Interactive Learning, and I am so excited. We got some really cool activities to share with you today, and really proud of some of the work we put together that we get to share with you today. So I think it's going to be a fun hour.
Great. So for today's agenda, we're going to start with our welcome and introductions, and then a quick icebreaker. And then we will give a brief overview of the We Are Water project. This might be new for some of you, might be old news for some of you, but we'll just give you some information on the background of this project, where we are in the timeline. And then after that, we will go into the CSLP 2023 Summer Learning Program. The theme this year is All Together Now, and we just thought that was a perfect match for what we've been developing at the We Are Water project, because it's all about coming together as communities and connecting over water. So we'll talk a little bit about the theme, and if you're interested in becoming a part of CSLP, there is a link in the link bank that will be dropping throughout the webinar if you want to join. Otherwise, I'm assuming many of you already are a part of CSLP, and that's why you're here today, to get some ideas. After we talk about CSLP, we'll go into the activity resources that we have for you today. There's some really fun ones that started off as sort of COVID take and make kits that have evolved to become a little more ready to do in person for All Together Now. Next, we'll share some We Are Water stories that have been collected throughout the project and end with a discussion. I also want to introduce Beatrice Chavez. She's our other colleague, an education specialist at the Space Science Institute. She'll be in the chat. She can answer questions, dropping resources, but she just dropped the link bank in the chat. So that has the links to all of the resources we'll be talking about today. So feel free to save that if you are interested in these resources. All right, and now I'll pass it over to Dylan to lead us through a quick icebreaker.
All right, so in keeping into the theme of All Together Now, and since the We Are Water project is so focused on the interactions between people, the environment, biology, non-biology, and in the Southwest, I thought it would be fun to kind of explore where we might fit into that kind of ecosystem. So since life in the Southwest relies on a delicate balance where both biological and non-biological processes contribute to the ecosystem, all together now as a biome, which part of the Four Corners ecosystem are you feeling like today? And you can go ahead and throw your answer in the chat. Maybe if you want to expand on why you're feeling that way today, that might be fun. So we have 4 options for you. Are you feeling like the land? Are you steady, constant, creating a home? Are you the water? Are you powerful and ready to make change? Are you the plants? Are you supportive and precious in this delicate desert ecosystem? Or are you the animals? Are you feeling super comfy at the top of the food web? Who's going to mess with you like that burrowing owl there? So for me, I've had a lot of caffeine today, so I'm feeling like the water. I'm powerful, ready to make some change and share some resources with you and hopefully change your summer programming. So we've got some answers. We got some people saying Flo Trujillo saying the water. We got some plants in the chat. A couple of lands. All right. No one's saying the animals, which is interesting. Everyone's feeling like they're the land, the water, or the plants today. That's really interesting. Lots of answers from them. And it's great to see we got people from all over the country too. We got some people from Virginia, it looks like. We got Dan Jones from the Miami-Dade Public Library System. Fantastic. We also have some wonderful Four Corners libraries I see tuning in. All right, so Claire, how are you feeling today? Which one are you feeling like?
You know, I so badly want to feel like the animals, top of the food web. I've been feeling like that a lot more recently. But I think today I'm a little more of the land, feeling that kind of steadiness. I have visitors coming. My parents are coming into town this weekend, so I'm like creating a space for them, you know, to rest safe or comfortably. So yeah, I would say the land.
Great. Well, I think that's a great way for us to get started thinking about this, our place in the We Are Water project, as well as our place in the ecosystem of informal learning, as well as comparing that to how it works in the ecosystem. I think that really relates to some of the activities we're going to be talking about today. So thanks everybody for sharing that in the chat and sharing all your locations. It's great to see from how many places y'all are joining us from. And I'll go ahead and turn this back over to Claire, who's going to talk about the CSLP theme for the summer. First we're going to talk about the We Are Water project, then we'll talk about the CSLP theme. I gave you guys, I was rushing ahead. See, the caffeine I was talking about.
Yeah, so just to give some context in terms of where these activity resources came from, this is all part of the We Are Water project, connecting communities. So this is a project that focuses on communities in the Four Corners region, which is a region of the southwestern US where Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado all combine their Four Corners. It's a really unique and special area. And as you can see in this picture, it is an arid environment. It's a desert environment. So water, while it is critical for the survival of all of us, it is also very scarce in this region, which is why we're really focusing on celebrating water and connecting over water when we don't have a lot of it. But I see a lot of you are coming in from other areas where water is a lot more plentiful. I see someone from the East Coast, New Jersey, we have Missouri, New York. So I do want to recognize that water, no matter where we're from, plays a special significance in our lives. Dylan and I were just chatting the other day about one of the activities we'll be demonstrating, the waffle garden activity, which is a traditional technique of growing food in the arid environment developed by indigenous peoples of the area who had lived there for centuries and knew the land so well. And they've developed this like incredibly effective way of retaining moisture in the soil. And Dylan is up in Seattle, Washington, and was prototyping it and creating a how-to video and found that in an area with a lot of moisture, this wasn't maybe the best technique. There was mold growing, there was too much water, and that just kind of speaks to the effectiveness of this strategy. But as we go through the activities and the resources, I want you to view it through the lens of your location and how the water stories in your communities are unique to your place and how, you know, maybe you can adapt some of these to celebrate your communities. So next slide, please. So this is a project that is a collaboration between scientists, indigenous science educators, learning researchers, informal educators, and library staff. And I'm happy to see several of the library staff on the call today who have been a part of this project. You can see here, these are just some of the organizations that have been working on this project. And I want to give a nod to to the leader of this project, which is Series Education and Outreach at CU Boulder. They have been doing an incredible job at developing these resources and building connections and relationships with communities in the Four Corners region. So what is this project? So we have been working with public and tribal libraries in the Four Corners regions, as I said. We have been serving Indigenous, Latinx, and rural communities, specifically the Four Corners region. As unique and amazing as it is a very rural area of the country. Our whole goal is to connect communities through conversations and explorations about water. And we have a multicultural traveling exhibit that accompanies the resources that we'll be sharing today. You can see the 4 pieces of the exhibit on this slide. And this exhibit is in Navajo, Spanish, English, and Ute languages. And we are also in the process of adding some Zuni language as well, since the exhibit is currently on display at the Zuni Tribal Archives in New Mexico. So there are 4 exhibit pieces. The one all the way on the left is our story wall. This is the main introductory piece. It's the biggest piece, and it includes digital stories digital stories you can listen to that we've been recording throughout the duration of the project, as well as a touch screen where you can play games. Kids can match up sounds with animals or weather phenomena. And there's drawing and writing prompts on it as well. So the visitors can actively be a part of creating the exhibit experience. Next, you'll see this giant Connect 4. This is the most popular with the little kids. It's generally in children's areas, but this is celebrating, as Dylan demonstrated in the icebreaker, the complex interactions between the natural parts of our ecosystem. So it has 4 different tokens that represent plants, animals, landmarks, and weather phenomenon. And it's a way for kids to learn about how those different elements of an ecosystem interact. The third picture is a Plinko game, and this is all about allocating water. So how do you share water with all the different communities, all the different needs for water? You don't have a lot. So this is an interactive way that folks can choose what type of weather they'll have any particular year. The options are rainy, drought, or extreme drought, and that will limit the amount of little Plinko balls that rain down. And then you have to make the hard decisions of where that water will go. Will it go to agriculture? Will it go to commercial interests? Will it go to which communities will be, accessing that water? And it's a hard decision to make. And the panels on this exhibit also demonstrate that these choices that water managers have made have not always been equitable, specifically for Indigenous and Latinx communities within the region. And the last piece is a AR sand table. So this is a sand table where people can actually make landforms out of the sand. There's a projector shining down, and they can hold their hand out under the projector, and it will rain light that symbolizes water, and you can watch how water moves through a watershed. So just another fun hands-on way to think about how, even if we're in different communities, we might still all be part of the same watershed, and how can we, celebrate that connection. Next slide, please. Oh, great question in the chat. What does AR stand for in the AR sand table? That stands for augmented reality. So it is a software system that is actively responding to physical stimulants outside of it. So when you put your hand under the projection, and in that big paneling next to it is a computer. And so that will actually cause a change in what is being projected. So a really cool piece of technology that we have included in the exhibit. So we are on the last year of this project. We began in 2020, March of 2020 to be specific. My very first meeting for this project was the first day I was working remotely. So we have had a lot of challenges to overcome, as you all might remember what happened March of 2020. So this has been a really incredible learning experience for all of us in how to develop exhibits when you're all remote, how to connect with communities when you can't meet in person. And there's been a lot of challenges along the way, but we are in our final year. We just kicked off our 2023 exhibit tour. As I said, the exhibit is currently on display at the Zuni Tribal Archives in New Mexico. The last 3 months, it was on display in Montrose, Colorado, at the Montrose Regional Library, and next it will be heading back to Colorado to Ignacio, Colorado, and then finally the last stop on the tour is Page, Arizona, right near Lake Powell. So it's been quite a journey, and we're at the end of it, and it's been so much fun. And we're just so excited to be able to share with you all of the resources. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about CSLP, or the Collaborative Summer Library Program. So this is a nonprofit organization that supports literacy, education, and science through summer reading events in public libraries. It produces materials designed by CSLP members that participating states or systems can use to develop interest in reading and library use. I'm guessing a lot of you are a part of this, since that's why you're here today. But just to give a little background, it began in 1987 when 10 Minnesota regional library systems decided to get together and be like, hey, let's share the work. Let's share the workload, because summer reading is so busy. So they got together and they developed a theme, artwork, and they selected incentives for a summer library program for children. And this has just really taken off and expanded through the years. But the guiding principle behind CSLP is that librarians are sharing ideas, expertise, and costs to produce a high quality summer reading program for all. So in addition to a guide that has all kinds of activities relating to that theme, there's also logos, images, public service announcement, videos, that you can use in your social media or promotion of your programs. And it takes that work off of you. So you don't have to be developing all of those high quality images. Now, this is something you do have to pay to be a part of. So we at StarNet, we're not necessarily promoting this. There are a lot of different options for your summer library programs. But we just thought the theme this year fit in so great with what we're doing with We Are Water, that if folks are participating in CSLP, we wanted to give you a few more ideas for your summer reading programs. Next slide. So the theme, all together now, summer reading starts today. I think the main concept behind this theme is that we have been in isolation for so long. There have been libraries that didn't get to do summer reading for a couple of years due to the pandemic. So, or maybe it was changed a little bit for take and make kits or virtual programs. But this year, so many libraries are going back to in-person library summer programs. And so that's why CSLP wanted to use this theme. We're all together now. We're all together again in person. And it's time to celebrate that. It's been a long time. Next slide. So here is just a really quick example of the materials that you would receive if you signed up for CSLP. This is a video that's a public service announcement to encourage folks to come to your library, and it can be customized to your specific spot. But we'll just take a brief look at it.
It's finally time to get back out together. Time to plan and grow together. To create and reconnect with friends and community. Time to have fun. To serve and build all together again. Summer programming is back at your local library, so we can be face-to-face and enjoy all the resources and fun the library offers every summer. All together now.
All right, thank you. So with that in mind, if you are interested in joining CSLP, the link is in the link bank. You can learn more there, but we're now going to shift to how you can use We Are Water resources and activities to be a part of this All Together Now theme. So our first resource is called Be a Water Historian. We did develop this as a take and make kit. As you saw in the timeline, the first few years of developing things, we were really focused on how can we do activities and engage patrons safely. So this is a take and make kit, but can easily be modified into something that you're doing in person. This also fits in well. There is an activity in the CSLP guide that's all about interviewing an elder and connecting over stories with the people in your community. So that's what this activity is all about. Community stories are important, and this activity wants to celebrate that. In this activity, participants learn how to be a good interviewer. So what you need for this activity is a brainstorm your activity guide, which is a part of this. It's all of these materials are included in this activity, and you can download it from our link bank in English, Spanish, and Navajo. You also need a family, friend, or community member to interview. For our version of this, we have been recording these stories. We have some of them that are audio clips, some of them are video clips, and that's something you can choose to do or not at your library. But if you do want to do that, you would need a smartphone, tablet, or computer to record the story. Sharing your personal reflections with We Are Water form, which is a permission for us to actually put your stories into our exhibit. As you saw on that story wall, we have a touch screen, and that's where visitors watching the exhibit can actually listen to the stories that you collect. And then, of course, a pen or a pencil to write your questions. This was created for ages 13 and up. So you can kind of think about that and who in your library this would be good for. Next slide, please. All right, so this activity comes in 3 parts. So part 1 is prepare for the interview. First, you want to identify who you want to interview, arrange a time, schedule a time to meet, and then use the Brainstormer interview guide and Be a Water Historian note cards to write down questions you want to ask. So the activity comes with these cards. You can print them out or you can make your own, but it starts with warm-up questions, and then the guide itself gives example questions that you can use, or you can make up your own. And then there are cards where you can ask the person you're interviewing memories they have about water, and then finally reflections and perspectives about water. So as I said, the guide comes with example questions to get you started, but otherwise you can really let the kid or the person experiencing this kind of interview the story they want to interview. Next slide. We have part 2. So this is where you actually conduct the interview, and if you choose to record it, you can record it. So you'd want to choose an audio or visual recorder for the interview. Most of the folks who have participated in this just use a smartphone. It's pretty easy. And then it gives a structured kind of example of how to go through an interview, especially for kiddos that maybe this is their first time being an interviewer. But it gives examples such as start with introductions, introduce yourself, invite the person to introduce themselves. Then start with a warm-up question. Don't jump right into something really intense, but start with a warm-up question to get that person thinking. Then ask your questions about water memories, reflections, and perspectives. And finally, thank the person you've interviewed. This section also has tips such as after you write down your questions during that prep phase, share them with the person you're interviewing ahead of time so that they can start thinking about some answers, especially if you're planning on recording the interview. Next slide. And finally, we have part 3, share the story. So if you are a library in the Four Corners region, so if you're from Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, or Utah, we would love to include the stories that you collect if you do this activity in our exhibit. Even if you're in northern Utah or not quite in the Four Corners regions exactly, we can still celebrate those 4 states. So before you share the story with us, of course, send that audio file to the person you interviewed and get their permission. We don't want to put anyone's story up that they're not willing to share with the public. If they do want to share their story to the We Are Water project, we ask that you fill out the online submission form that is included in the activity guide as a QR code or a link. And then you would submit it, and then we would gather that and put it into the exhibit so your stories are being shared as the exhibit travels around. Now, if you're not part of the, if you're not in the Four Corners region, of course, feel free to take this activity, modify it, run with it. If you want to share this on your social media or just have it as, an activity to help kids learn about information literacy or interviewing strategies, you can absolutely do this without the sharing component. But if you are from the Four Corners region, we'd love to hear your story. All right, the next activity is called Walk Through Time. So this is an activity where libraries display historical photos of your community that relate to water, and then compare them with contemporary photos of the same area. Now, when we developed this in 2020, we developed it as a story walk. So this would be an outdoor program, social distancing, safety, and all that. And we also have an activity guide where you can turn this into a digital photo gallery that you put on your social media or people interact with virtually. Next slide, please. Of course, you can still do both of those options, but we've added a little modification for this to be an in-person program. So when you're all together now in your library programs, how can you make your own living story wall at your library? It's sort of a way to tell stories through photos and really examine, the changes over time. What are the impacts that these changes have on our water systems? What are the impacts they have on our economy? So it's a way to really kind of dig deep into the changes in your community, specifically around water. Next slide, please. All right, so here are just some of the examples of the writing and discussion prompts included within the activity guide. So you can display photos and put up questions that people can respond to either as a discussion if you're doing an in-person program, or written if you're doing a story wall. So these are the questions. It has, what does water mean to you and your community? Have you visited this place before? Share a memory. How important are dams or mines to our community? What are some positive and negative effects they have? What happens upstream of the dam? What happens downstream? What impacts does this structure have on the environment? In what ways do people use rivers? Or how might building a dam or water treatment plant affect a river? So again, this could be a great passive program, or you can bring in experts from your community and hold a panel discussion using some of these questions. Next slide, please. This activity also includes drawing prompts. This was the most popular part when we were testing this out at a library, was the drawing prompts. Kids loved just like doing art and thinking about the different animals. So some of the prompts we have for drawing are, what do you think this area will look like 100 years in the future? Especially if you have a historical photo, a contemporary photo, so they can see those changes over time. You know, prompt them to think about what the future might look like through drawing. Draw 3 animals that use the water in this photo to survive. Draw your favorite activity to do in a lake or river. Or draw what this area would look like if the dam did not exist. So these are just some example questions that we put together specifically for the Southwest, which we do rely on dams quite a lot for our electricity. So there are benefits to it, but of course, there are also drawbacks. But I'm sure you could think in your community of other types of water features that exist in your community and how they interact with your community. Next slide, please. And last, we did put together a little scavenger hunt prompt. If you want to get your kids going outside, get your families going to different areas in your community, but you can put up different pictures throughout your community and ask things like, you recognize this location? Snap a photo of what it looks like today and submit it to the library. You can start adding community photos to your story wall. Or does this building still exist? Find the location and submit a photo. That could be a fun way for kids to see, what happens if a structure no longer exists. How has that changed the community? And that is a walkthrough time. And next slide, I think I will now turn it over to Dylan.
Before we start talking about the Waffle Garden, I really want to highlight that one of the things I like most about the story walk and the walkthrough time activity is how well it engages lots of different types of learners. If you're maybe a librarian that has some visitors who are neurodivergent, the fact that there are speaking discussion prompts, drawing discussion prompts, prompts to go out and explore outside, it really addresses a lot of ways of kinesthetic, verbal, visual learning, and can provide a way for lots of people to tell their stories in a way that they can communicate, which I really, really like about that activity. So I also wanted to highlight that and make sure to emphasize that. One of the next activity we're going to be talking about is the Waffle Garden activity. Claire was referencing this a little earlier. So the Waffle Gardens are a technique that Indigenous groups in the Southwest have been using for a very, very long time. There's been a really big push recently to reclaim this as an agricultural technique in times of drought. And what it is it's a way of gardening and planting gardens where you build berms and walls around your your plots of potted plants. That is plots of potted plants. That's hard to say. And what those walls and berms do is if you place these in areas where there's natural runoff, those waffled little inlets retain water a lot better than a flat bed. So what we've done is put together a step-by-step video guide that walks you through the material, how to build the garden, how to build a non-waffle garden to go along with it, and how to monitor your seedlings and compare and gather data on how well each one of those is retaining water. There's also instructions on alternative materials you can use because we are sending out waffle garden kits to participating We Are Water libraries that have seeds, containers for planting, soil, et cetera, et cetera. We also provide a list of ways you can do this activity if you aren't getting one of those kits. So here's some screenshots from these, walking through the 5 steps of this activity. And then an example you can see there in the bottom, I've included a time lapse where I grew my own basil seedlings in waffle gardens in my home office and proved the efficacy. And I found that just like indigenous people have known for a very, very long time, waffle gardens retain water and didn't need nearly as much water as the non-waffled garden. So if you're interested in checking this video out, the activity is on the STEM activity clearinghouse. It's also included in the We Are Water collection on the STEM activity clearinghouse. And the how-to video will be available on our StarNet Library's YouTube channel. We're publishing that this week. The final activity we're going to be talking about is another activity in the We Are Water STEM Activity Clearinghouse collection called Recipe for a Region. And this is a really cool activity. It's a really great group activity, cross-generational activity, because there's so many different ideas being shared. And the whole idea is that you learn about what makes different regions in the US special. What's their latitude? What's the general elevation in there? How much precipitation and rainfall do they have there? And what agricultural plants do grow in that region due to that climate? And you ask your visitors to separate them into groups, and they come up with kind of an Iron Chef style challenge where they design a meal or a banquet using special ingredients from that region. So you're exploring how the ecology of the region, of the regions of the US through food, and you learn how that ecology supports regional foods that are like a recipe of different climate, geological, and biological factors. So on screen, I've got the recipe card for the Southwest, and that talks all about things like it's a very dry, high elevation area. It's got pretty high summer temperatures, pretty low winter temperatures, and not that much precipitation. So the types of plants that grow there are very drought resistant, usually grown in succession. And it's a really interesting way of examining the different ingredients, so to speak, that go into creating the environments we see around us and comparing that to how the things that can grow in that area impact what the cuisines and regions of those regions in the US. So it's a nice way to think about the geological and environmental history of an area and compare that to the cultural history of an area by the foods we eat. And so that is the final activity. And one of the great things we want to discuss too in this webinar is how these activities can flow together and how you can scaffold them to create some programming either in one day or across the summer if you're doing collaborative summer reading. So this is kind of an example of how you can scaffold these one after another to kind of think about the theme of collaborative summer reading all together now and tie these activities together to get your community thinking about the world around them, the world in your community, the environment of your community, and how the stories of your community are impacted by the environment around you. So you could start off by doing Recipe for a Region as kind of a examination and an exploration of the foods people like to eat in the area, which of those foods are impacted by local ingredients, and how those local ingredients are really defined by the environment of your area. So you can explore those regional foods and recipes. Then after that, you can maybe run the waffle garden and take some of those plants that grow specifically in your area. Say if you're in the Southwest, you could create some squash, some beans, or those kind of seedlings, and you can do a waffle garden activity after you've explored some of those regional foods and start growing those foods yourself. From there, you can use that as a jumping off point to explore the Be a Water Historian as you're learning about the different foods in the area, what it takes to grow them. Those are great warm-up discussions for some of the Be a Water Historian activity, where you can use one of the things that the Be a Water Historian activity emphasizes is using warm-up questions and engaging with people with a way you know that will get them talking. And food is always a great jumping off point for discussions. And when we're talking about local foods that are impacted by the environment, water is so intimately tied to that. So you can use those. What are foods local foods you liked growing up is a great way to prompt some of that discussions and start some of those discussions about water and how water has impacted people throughout their lives. Then once you've collected those stories, you can use those stories to start putting together your story walk. You can share those local water stories, and depending on where your seedlings are, maybe you've been growing some of those waffle garden seedlings all summer, replanted them, and now they're bearing fruit near the end of the summer. You can maybe use some of those to cook some foods to share along with your story walk, or invite people to bring their favorite local dishes to a potluck to accompany your story walk. So you can see these activities, while they're great on their own, also are really good for scaffolding and creating a whole line of programming throughout the summer to go along with the summer reading theme of All Together Now. So it's a great way to connect these activities. And this is not a set order. You can run this backwards, forwards, mix it all up, whatever makes sense for you and your community. So now I'll pass this back over to Claire to talk about some of the water stories that We Are Water has collected.
Great, thank you so much, Dylan. Yeah, so one of the things we could do during the pandemic was do some interviews with some of the techniques from the Be a Water Historian and actually reach out to communities. And we're still collecting stories in each of these 4 states. As the exhibit is traveling, we're collecting more and more stories. So I wanted to just share with you that this is something you can access online. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to the exhibit to hear some of these really great stories. But we would love to give you a little example of some of the stuff that the communities have been creating. They range from super silly to really serious, because yeah, water is so important. Everybody needs water. So on the next slide, I have an example of one of our silly ones. This was created by some high school students in New Mexico. And it is very silly, but you can see throughout it, it is scaffolded with actual, water facts and tips for conserving water. So it's called Dry, Hot American Summer.
This is Baby Sass. Now that his main source of water is extinct, so is he. New Mexico has been in a drought for 14 years and counting. You can help conserve water by purchasing a water-efficient toilet. This poor jackalope was crossing the road to find another source of water when a distracted driver ended his journey. Approximately 1.23 million animals get killed every year wandering onto the road searching for water. You can help conserve water by taking less time in the shower. This is Chupacabra. She is the last of her kind and bedridden in the hospital because of dehydration. This is due to desertification, the process of fertile land becoming desert. You can prevent this by bathing your dog on the lawn to recycle the water to the grass. Some ways that New Mexico is conserving water is through desalinization, taking seawater and turning it into fresh water through reverse osmosis, using groundwater, which is known as aquifers, and catching condensation with fog catchers. And remember, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down.
Wait, Dylan, there's some really great bloopers at the end.
Take it.
I'm going to start the For Your Consideration Oscar campaign for that now.
Oh, yes. Some real talent. Yeah, so for that, a library did partner with the school, and the high school teacher got those kids involved, and they filmed it and they submitted it, and now it has been traveling around, being watched by folks in the Four Corners region. But as I mentioned, there are also there are so many stories now that we have, and we are looking for more. So if you live in the Four Corners region, we'd love for you to share photos, videos or text, and you can submit those at wearewater.colorado.edu/stories. That's also where you can find all of our collection of stories if you want to find more. But it's really easy. You just click on this link, fill out a form for permission, and then upload whatever you would like to share. And you will become part of the exhibit. Next slide, please. So if you're outside the Four Corners region, I still think this is a really fun way to engage your kids, your communities, through just sharing stories. If you have Makerspace or any type of video editing software that you use, this could be a topic, that you use for any of those types of clubs. Like, what does water mean to you? And I would love to hear from you all. If you are interested in doing something like this and you're not part of the Four Corners region, how would you display or share these stories with your community? And you can go ahead and answer in the chat if you have any ideas. Right, Heather says a story walk. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad, story walks are so fun and engaging in just a different way, to experience stories and histories. We joke that we call this walk through time a history walk, because it's bringing in historical photos. All right, and social media, absolutely. Debbie shared Facebook, other social media. I know that some libraries that I've been talking to lately are dabbling in TikTok, which is not something I am very adept at. But if that's something you're already doing, consider giving it a water slant. Ooh, Susan suggested a community movie festival featuring short videos. Absolutely. Great. Well, yeah, just keep thinking about that. Check out the stories section on the We Are Water page for ideas. There's all kinds of ones up there. And another thing I just really loved about that previous one that we just watched was they were also bringing in a little bit of cultural stuff in there as well, talking about the chupacabra and stuff like that. Ooh, Michelle says our art center of Battle Creek in Michigan is hosting a Be a Water Hero, all ages multimedia STEAM exhibit this coming fall. We'll have a greenhouse or harvest hut to tell stories in. Build 3D models of our watershed, collaborate with local food pantry and community garden on waffle gardens. Awesome. Yeah.
Some amazing ideas in the chat. And one of the things I really like too that I'm seeing in the chat is the idea of using some of these water stories, these water activities. The collaborative summer, the summer reading theme is all together now. So this is a great opportunity to explore community partnerships. What organizations in your community have you worked with in the past that might be able to contribute or, host an event or help you gather stories, have a story wall you can host at their location? Or is there opportunities are there organizations you've been meaning to reach out to partner with? Is this a good excuse to break that glass and get and build some new community partnerships with your library and your library visitors?
Great. Well, we've already started this discussion, but a slightly different slant. But what ideas do you have for connecting with your community around water topics at your library? So I think we've already started that conversation. But if you have any other ideas, if it sparked any ideas, as Dylan said, has this, made you think of a partnership in your community that you can start building around water quality, water conservation, gardening? Yeah, we'll give you a few more minutes to jot down any ideas you have in the chat. Ooh, water safety. Yeah, David, if you don't mind expanding on that a little bit, I'd love to learn more. But what immediately comes to my mind is I just started swim lessons for my 20-month-old. I didn't know they had swim lessons for kids that little, but they've really showed me how important it is, even starting at such a young age, to know what to do if you are in water, water safety. Donna shares, our library is located right on the Illinois River, and the town has part of the historical I&M Canal. Any ideas how we can integrate those geographic historic features? Yeah, I think the walk through time activity would be great for that if you have historical photos. And then, you know, you invite people in the community to take pictures today of what it looks like now, and you can compare it from the past. Or, you know, bringing in a guest speaker is always great. Someone from a historical society who can speak to that history, I think would be great for a multi-generational program or an adult program.
I think too, specifically thinking about the I&M Canal, that has such a deep, rich history as a transportation hub pre-railroad. So maybe there's something to start exploring. Immigration stories are part of a water story. How has the food in Illinois been impacted by being able to bring things in from farmlands in the South all the way down to Mississippi? What is that kind of exchange through a water story like the historical canal? How has that changed your community and the types of people, food, culture in your community through that transportation? I think that's an interesting thing to explore through the water historian activity, through the story walk activity, as well as maybe even though Illinois might not be the best area for a waffle garden activity, doing some gardening and thinking about how plants and seeds travel via commerce, immigration is a great way to explore the history of your area through that lens.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm just going to read out some of these for those watching the recording. We've got some great ideas that we love to share and steal. So make a bottle water filter. We actually have an activity called Low Tech Water Filter for High Impact Clean. That is exactly that. And that is on the We Are Water Activity Clearinghouse collection. Valerie shared, living by the ocean, beach cleanup is an ongoing need. Absolutely. And I would say even along rivers and streams as well. One of my alternative spring breaks that I did in college was a river trip down the Green River, and we just had so much fun. But on the way we were cleaning up the river, we found so many tires just pitched into the river, and we're pulling it out. But yeah, cleaning up our community all together now. Citizen science kits, absolutely. Donna says, we have an Army Corps of Engineers at our lock and dam. They teach water safety. And someone else mentioned, Michelle mentions American Red Cross is a training on dealing with emergency floods. And David commented back again, yes, to promote the local resources for learning to swim, how to be safe around ponds and fishing docks and rivers, and using boats. Yeah, and something that is a big thing in the Four Corners, we don't get a lot of water, but when we do, the ecosystem isn't quite, the land isn't, able to absorb some of the monsoon types of rainfall that we get in the fall. And so flash floods become a big deal. It can be very dangerous. And so, in part of celebrating our land and our, the landscape around us is knowing about the landscape and knowing, if I'm camping, maybe don't camp in a dry creek bed, because although it looks dry now, if it rains later, that's exactly where the water will be diverted and can be very dangerous. All right, Sherry has the River Authority coming out to talk to kids about river and how we can keep from polluting the river. Susan says changes upstream that increase flooding. Yes, yeah, and again, more safety stuff, how to recognize when rivers are unsafe, the water is too high, the current is too strong. And I would say that's really important if you're in a coastal community as well with the ocean. Explore your community's water sources. How is water quality monitored? Lots of activities in the activity clearinghouse. Absolutely. Yeah, water quality is very important. And I think in our last webinar, which you can access on our YouTube channel, which is in the link bank, we actually promoted a citizen science water quality testing kit that you can purchase.
Claire, you beat me to the punch by 30 seconds. I just put that link into the chat to our Earth Day Citizen Science webinar. I noticed that there was some talk about citizen science kits, including the Earth Echo Water Kit, which we discussed in our Earth Day webinar back in February. And I put that link to the recording of that webinar in there, where we talk about a few different citizen science water-based citizen science projects, as well as talking about another great thing that would be a perfect match for collaborative summer leading programming, all about putting together a social media photo challenge, which is another great way to engage your community this summer around water issues and the summer reading theme. So that link is in the chat as well.
Great. And Michelle says a regional university has a clean boats, clean water program around invasive species spread. Another important thing that I think is always good to remind us, to clean our boats, clean our boots, if we're coming from a different part of the country or a different part of the world, so we're not unintentionally spreading invasive species. And yes, I'm so glad Donna brought up the globe mosquito habitat. She has used this as part of a river and canal cleanup. We love the Globe Observer program. All you need is a smartphone, and yeah, the globe mosquito habitat, while it sounds a little scary, it's actually a lot of fun and a great way to engage in citizen science around water. All right. Oh, and just for fun, our water conservation district, instead of helping us do STEAM programs, they offer STREAM, and the R is for rivers. That is fun. Awesome. Oh, great. Dolores got the Earth Echo Water Kit that Dylan mentioned before. I'm going to have to check out STREAM. People in the chat are saying STREAM is a great thing to check out. All right. Ellie shares local watershed groups showing people how rivers and such are contaminated using their Enviroscape. Okay, Dylan, we need to take a look at that link. I'm very intrigued. Awesome. Great. Well, these are fantastic ideas. I now have, a list of things I'm going to go start researching and see how we can get more ideas for the We Are Water project. All right. Well, if you have any more ideas, feel free to drop them in the chat. We are ending a little bit early, but we'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone has questions. But thank you all so much for being here and engaging so much in the chat. We just really love the We Are Water project. It's been, as employees at the Space Science Institute, we're often, looking up into the universe, but it's fun to have these projects where we really celebrate our planet, our Earth, and how our communities are connected through Earth science. So thank you all so much for joining. We'll stick around for a few more minutes and have a great rest of your day.
And thanks everyone for sharing such great ideas in the chat. It's always so great for us to hear how creative y'all are in creating community-based programming and bringing your community together around all sorts of different issues and ideas. Just absolutely fantastic to see y'all doing such great work out there, and it's humbling to be able to provide some extra resources to help you do that work.
All right, a couple questions. So to access the kits, you can just fully download the activity guides, and then you would just develop the materials or purchase the materials yourself. They're all very low, expensive materials, but to access those kits, they're in the link bank. And Beatrice, if you could drop that one more time, there is a link to the We Are Water webpage. You can get it through there. There are also direct links to each of the different kits that we talked about, and you can download all of the materials from there. And we have another question. I'm looking at what may be a water table behind the PowerPoint. Recommendations on affordable water tables. That is a great question. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by water tables? Looks like Dylan might be doing some research. We can also take that question and do some research for you and email you, Donna. I think I have your email address actually.
Donna, are you referring to the AR sand table? Is that what you were talking about? Or I'm trying to think of what do you mean by water table?
Oh, patrons can rearrange rivers and flow, maybe the sand table, where one can see how flooding happens in unexpected ways. So, okay, we did have a water table that I think is what you're referring to. It was brought to one of our opening day events for the We Are Water Project exhibits at one of our libraries, and it was actually brought by a community partner. I will find out who that was. That was specifically in Aztec, New Mexico. And I don't remember who the community partner was, but that could be a way if there's folks in your community that do like school programs or outreach programs. That's what this organization was. They brought this really cool water table and kids got to explore it for that day. And everything that you're saying, and it was kind of like a sand table, and there were different ways that kids could explore how water moves. So I'll get the name of that community partner just to give you ideas for who you can reach out in your community.
I think what you actually, the word you're looking for, Donna, might be stream table. I think that's what you're looking at, where you flow water through some sand, and it shows how the water affects and creates streams and meanders in there. I think there's actually a ton of great DIY options for stream tables. If you Google DIY stream table, and another good resource for that, if you are nearby a university with a geology department, many geology departments have stream tables, and they build their own stream tables as part of teaching people about geomorphology. I'm saying this as a former geology major. So if you've got a community college or university that has geology classes, I'm reaching out to them and asking what resources, how they found or created their stream table to teach their students. Might be a great way to get some advice on how to build your own for not too expensive. I know that my geology department, we had a winter break activity where we rebuilt like 4 of them for our geomorphology lab when I was an undergrad. So and this is a thing that building stream tables is what a common geology department activity. So that might also be an additional resource if you're interested in getting some advice there. And as you just pointed out, contacting and forming a community partnership with the local community college is another example of being all together now. And I think that is the best way we could possibly end this webinar on, bringing it all back around. I appreciate you so much, Donna, for doing that for us. We couldn't have scripted that better. So thanks for everybody for sticking around with us for this hour. I've had a lot of fun sharing out these resources. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about anything we've covered today. And we'll be glad to help you follow up and create some cool programming this summer with We Are Water, if you're one of the We Are Water libraries, or if you're just a fantastic library who attended this webinar to get some great ideas around summer programming. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week and a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.